You've got the first one up, Pedro, which is also what I was going to put on the agenda. So we can go either way on this.
Yeah. So last week we had a chat with the security orchestration category. So the folks from the security orchestration category from the container security group. And we were talking about that epic where essentially the idea is to have a workflow builder initially focused on security policies. And you can then, for each kind of policy, have different triggers and actions, basically. And you can do many interesting things there. And one of them, which is the purpose of that epic, is to manage the vulnerability checks. So the approval rule that is related or linked to the security results of a merge request, and to manage that vulnerability check and see and check and set how many approvals are required. For example, if there are more than 10 critical vulnerabilities and so on. And we had that chat last week with the team, and we also, and Kai has been involved in the epic with some comments. And yeah, I just wanted to have a synchronous sync up on this to understand where do we stand on this and what would be what would be the most reasonable path forward, and also how much involved do we want to be in this conversation, because in the end, this affects the approval rules that appear in the merge request and change the status of the mergeability. So, for example, one merge request, depending on the policies that the project has, one merge request may have a vulnerability check approval rule, and so the merge may be blocked. But another one, depending on the configuration, could be good to merge and may not have any vulnerability check approval rule. So in terms of the merge request experience, in the end, and the code review experience, so the day-to-day code review experience, it won't, my understanding is that it won't change that user experience. What it will change is the experience of setting up the approval rules. And then we also have the larger topic of how this new way of setting policies and this kind of workflow builder with if this, then that structure, how does that fit into GitLab as a whole, not just for security, but GitLab as a whole, and if we're okay with that. So yeah, I'll stop there for initial comments before continuing my rambling.
Hidden in there, I think one of your biggest ones is this us or is this source code? And I would say, sort of in the absence of a source code PM, I feel like that's where some of like taking this up comes from, potentially, is like we don't have the other strong ally there where we left approval rule creation. And I think we probably, given where we've been in the last few months, Part of me feels like maybe we should have brought approval rules to code review, and I know why we didn't at the time, but maybe at some point we might reconsider that and figure out how to do that. Because I think that experience is more closely related to the merge request than it is to why we left them in source code. But so, I think that's a valid concern of like how much time should we spend there. I think the other piece of this, and I think you brought it up in the call, and the other piece is I am maybe I am concerned about the advanced um, editor, whatever they want to call it, for approval rules. I think like that is, as you put it very clearly, Pandora's box in terms of like every form of approval rules that exists. Someone's going to now say, well, I want this, I want to be able to edit them this way. And like, it's just not going to exist that way unless we all stop and start from the beginning and say, this is what we want that to be. And I think that goes to what my biggest concern here is. Yes, what they want to do with security policies sort of logically makes sense in terms of their separation of permissions and how they want to flow that down. My biggest concern is really that I, as a PM, can probably not logically explain to a customer how and where they would now go in the application to configure all of the various types of approval rules. And like, let alone could we then go back to Amy and say, hey, Amy, you need to write documentation about approval rules. And depending on the type of approval rule, you'll have to send people to like 4 different places in the UI. They've got different ways that you configure and set them up. And like all of that happens. And then this is how it works once you get into an approval, like into the project. I think that to me is the larger concern I have, is that this gets really, really hard to explain to users because someone's not holding the entirety of the approval experience in check with this. And I think that's probably where I'm starting with a concern, is that's the piece that's hard for me to wrap my head around, is how do we talk to users about this? And that comes from a place where it is already immensely challenging to talk to users about the difference between configured approval rules, like explicit approval rules, protected branch approval rules, and code owner approval rules. Those are all, in theory, like different forms of approval. And that leaves out everything else. And those are like our mess that we created. And then we're just going to like keep, compounding that pile of things. And I think that is to me where like this concern is more relevant. At least the way the security check one works today, it's in the approval rules section, logically makes sense. Like you could get on board with that. I think like what they're trying to do, taking it away, to me, that's where I'm concerned, I guess. It's not an answer to your question, but I think that's after I've thought about this more and more, and didn't sleep the first night and sent you that super long message that I haven't posted anywhere. I haven't. That's where I'm at, I think, for now.
Yeah. So let's talk about the easy, or the thing that we code review don't necessarily need to worry so much about, which is that Pandora box. I found a documentation page about threat monitoring. So let me paste that in the agenda while I was looking at the categories page, and it doesn't have any screenshots, so I can't say for sure, but it looks like they already have something like that implemented, because they talk about a visual builder below. So the Pandora box maybe is already out the door. yeah, from the screenshots, it looks like that. The screenshots in the epic. So let me paste that in as well. But anyway, the advanced way of configuring approval rules. Yeah, I think it's like
I'm not
like
concerned
many
about the
things that
advanced piece. I'm concerned
yeah,
about
go ahead.
the different locations that you now go to configure approval rules, right? Like you as a project owner now need to visit 4 different pages to configure all of the types of approval rules. It's not the advanced piece, I would say, is part of the workflow builder. What I'm concerned in that Pandora box, my concern is how do I tell you as a project owner all of the places that you go to configure approval rules?
Yeah, links to an issue that I was created not long ago. Well, actually 2 months ago. Time flies. Framework for source code rules, and this is something that Mike Nichols from Source Code, he is taking a look at, and you can see in the description a screenshot of something that we were working together in Figma, and it's basically it's a start. It's just mapping what we already have today in terms of rules that control what can or cannot go into in terms of source code management. Approval rules, protected branches, code owner, status checks, push rules, and protected tags. And I was pushing this with him because I want us to look at this holistically and understand that the goal is the same. Like when someone is looking across all of these features, what they want is effectively the same. They want to set the rules of what goes in or not, or what requires some override mechanism, which is like approvals or something like that. And so I think this is something that, first of all, we already have a very disjointed experience. And this is something that I think it's also linked here in the beginning of the issue. The recommendations from a category maturity scorecard that we did, which there's an issue to improve the organization of repository and merge request policy settings. And there's also an explanation of the severity of the problem. And this just compounds that problem. So basically we would have, I don't know if it would be yet another column for this, which is yet another location in the UI, which will be very difficult, not only from a user experience, the user experience in the product, but also what you said, Kai, that it would also be difficult to explain to users or customers that go through the documentation, because the way we organize the documentation needs to make some sense. And if the experience is disjointed, the documentation is likely to be disjointed as well, or very difficult to make sense. Like maybe you need to preface the documentation by saying, hey, we know the experience is disjointed, so bear with us in this documentation page. But anyway, so there's this, and Mike is working on this, and I haven't yet included him in this conversation about what the security orchestration category is thinking, but I intend to do so in the short term. And yeah, I am also concerned that this would be another thing to support in terms of approval rules. And what I would like, again, coming back to what I was going to say in the beginning, what I'd like to see is what we don't usually do at GitLab, which is to think further into the future and the consequences of our iterations. And what I've heard in that call which is legitimate, was Sam saying that yes, there are what if scenarios, but we're iterating our way there, and we're doing this as a first iteration. We're shipping this, and we're going to learn from it, which is valid. But I think we should also put some confidence or assign some confidence levels to those what if, because if a what if is very likely to happen, we need to plan for it. Like, and what we've seen here is a group that is thinking about an advanced way of setting approval rules, but the experience hasn't been thought through about how that would be reconciled with the other kinds of approval rules. And what you said, like now that you have to go to another location, and this is just for vulnerability checks in the beginning. It's not going to be for license checks. And we don't know if license checks will be on board with this or not. So I think what would be reasonable is to perhaps think about doing it in a way that it's easy for us to move away from, if we realize that the way we need to organize the experience of our policies is different from what it's being proposed. Because I don't know how easy it will be for us to backtrack from a file that has all of the policies, and now we need to say to users, hey, now you have a different way of setting those approval rules, and it's not in a file. How is that going to work?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think the work Mike is doing is good. I know Austin's also heavily involved in that because of compliance wanting to have some say over how approval rules are managed and configured, which sounded like a chief concern of the secure group, was that there were some policy and permissions issues with how people could access those and how they flowed down, that compliance feels like they're also trying to solve. Which means we'll also end up with sort of two different ways that we solve cascading rule sets across things. So I think that's another area that we need to spend more time. I think yeah, I think maybe we just try and force those conversations and have Mike take a look at this and have Austin take a look at this and get them to sort of lead the charge on how we do or don't, or have this go through or don't have this go through the process. And I know Sarah was in the call last week. I'm going to talk to Sarah either today or tomorrow again, just to sort of get her take on this and see how she's feeling as well.
Yeah. I think, as I said, I think this can compound an existing problem. And I understand why they're doing it, and they have valid reasons to, or at least the problems that they explain are valid, and they don't want to go out of their way to fix or extend our permissions model to allow this granular level of deciding who can change the policies. But the thing is that what they will build here, like having a separate project that has the security policies, it's something, as you said, like the compliance group will want that, and compliance-minded users will want that as well, perhaps, or maybe they want it in the same project. And the same thing can happen for someone that is that is setting up, protected branches or push rules or protected tags or even other kinds of approval rules, they might say, I want to keep those separate from the project settings because maintainers can access those settings as well and change them. And I think this then becomes also a philosophical discussion about how we want to structure and extend our permissions model. If this is the way to do it, like if anytime you want to do something in isolation, we need to do it through a separate project. Is that the way to do it? I think there are so many different considerations here that, as I said, it feels like we're just, okay, let's ship this as it is and then see how it works. I think it would be useful to do more user validation with this and problem validation, and not only from security standpoint, but also from the other points of views. But yeah, thanks for bringing that up with Sarah, and I'll bring it up with Mike and Austin. I'll probably send them the recording of the. Was it recorded? I think it was our chat last week with them.
It was recorded. I don't know if it's in that. Let me see if Sam went back and.
It wasn't in the agenda.
It's not. Okay. We can ask Sam where the recording is.
Okay. Yeah. I will probably send them the recording so that they're up to speed, and probably set up a quick sync with them so that we can all vent together. Sometimes that's needed. I think that's something we should add to our exceptions, list of exceptions for synchronous calls and meetings is, exactly, like psychological safety and mental health. Anyway, okay. Amy, you have, I don't think, at least for my part, there's nothing else that I want to bring up about this topic. Kai, is there anything you want to talk about this?
No, I think I'm fine. I'm just going to continue to sit on that response that I had sent you before for now. And
okay,
we'll see how the next couple of days go with some other conversations, and then maybe there's some changes there or something.
Okay, yeah, I think it's fair to sit on something and just reflect on it a little bit, because this definitely warrants that reflection time. It's not an easy problem.
Yep.
Amy.
Okay, so I'll be out for 5 days. I know, right?
Seeing people cheering that rather than worrying makes me feel better about the people you work with.
My husband. There is a short-term note, which is let me know if there's anything that you need me to wrap up before tomorrow afternoon, because we're going on a road trip and there won't be a laptop. But long-term, I do want to solve the problem of how do we prepare for Amy to go backpacking somewhere interesting in the world, because when the world becomes a little more normal, we're getting back on that. So planning for redundancy is a good thing. That's all.
Cool. Thanks for letting us know. I'm very excited about your road trip. It sounds like your husband is also excited about the road trip. Yeah, I'm very happy that you're taking this time off, as I already said. And yeah, we will survive, I guess.
Oh, yeah, you'll be fine.
Yeah, and in terms of redundancy, yeah, I think that's an interesting discussion to have. But yeah, fortunately, the kind of work that you do, yeah, I think it's, without trying to talk too much, but I think it's the kind of work you do is extremely important and valuable, but it's also interesting that it's very easy to
Postpone.
iterate on, and if something is not right, it's very easy to change and make it amazing, which I think sometimes seems to lower the value of the work that technical writers do, because it's just text,
Right.
what's the big deal about text?
It's
But
just
it's
English. How
actually
hard is
really
it?
important. Yeah.
But it is also not necessarily time sensitive. Does it need to be done immediately? No. Should it get done eventually? Yeah. Trying to keep perspective on my own work there. But yeah, well, I'm fumbling for a good phrase. We're not going to pack up and go do a major trip, I'd say within the next 6 months. But I also think it will take us some time to develop some plan for redundancy.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. And yeah, you should take time off and go on road trips whenever you like, and don't have to worry about our work here.
Excellent. Okay, that's all. Guys,
Awesome.
got anything else?
No,
for
I'm
me.
excited that you're taking time off. Enjoy your trip. Time off is good.
Yeah, we've got family to go see.
Even better that you can go and see family again. So
Yes.
Amazing.
enjoy.
That's a rarity nowadays. In person, I mean, seeing them in person.
Yes. Okay, anything else?
No, all good from my side.
I'm good as well. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Cheers. Bye-bye.